welcome to our last session of the Teaching Skills for Complex Textbook Study. We are so glad you are here. And if Leigh, we could jump right ahead. Okay. So we will start by acknowledging that ONLIT's work does take place on traditional Indigenous territories, and we acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work on this land, and we are thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people for their care for and teachings about the earth. And this acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities to our relationships and to the ancestral lands on which we learn, work, and live. And I know not news to many of you, but if you're new to ONLIT, we are a joint project between Dyslexia Canada and the Ontario branch of the International Dyslexia Association, charged with supporting the rollout and the implementation of the revised language curriculum. And we are able to do that thanks to the generous funding of the Ontario Ministry of Education, noting that the views expressed tonight are the views of ONLIT and not necessarily reflecting those of the Ministry of Education. We have all of these recordings that are posted in the ONLIT resource library. So if you ever need to go back and want to double check, or, as this book study comes to a close, if you need to come back and revisit some content, they will always live in there, and it will link to the playlist so you can access all of them through that one link.
Okay, welcome everybody. We thought that we would begin again tonight, as we've done for the last two sessions, I believe, with some retrieval practice. So you'll remember that retrieval practice is that strategy of intentionally recalling facts or concepts or events from memory, rather than just passively rereading or reviewing in order to enhance learning and deepen learning. The act of retrieving something from your memory actually strengthens the connections, thinking of like that Velcro analogy, the connections that hold it there. So making it more likely that you'll be able to recall it in the future and send it into long-term memory. So we are going to try a bit of an experiment here. Bear with us. We're going to do a Zoom poll, and we're going to cross our fingers that it works. So you will either see all 5 questions pop up, not 5 questions, sorry, 5 statements rather, at a time, or one will appear at a time. We're about to find out. And so we will ask you in a moment to read the statement and decide if it is true or false. All of the statements pertain to our content from the last session on finding evidence in literary and informational text. So Una, if you could go ahead and give that a go, we'll see what happens here.
Okay, so I wonder, I'm afraid to end the poll.
I was just about to say, if I end it, will that make it so you can't see it? I don't know.
Probably. Well, let's just go. I'm just going to go through it really quickly.
Thanks. Good idea.
So the first statement, and hoping that everyone can still see it on their screen, but Leigh, I wonder if you can click through the slide and the statements will.
For sure I can, I think.
Okay, perfect. So having students generate questions is a strategy without robust research support. This one has us at about 40% true, 60% false. So there's this one might be harder to retrieve. So actually, the National Reading Panel found that having students generate questions is a strategy that has a lot of research support behind it.
And in fact, that's the one we did practice last week, that fact to question strategies. Oh,
turning facts into questions. Exactly. So that is false. Number 2, text-based questions can also require an inference. Absolutely, they can. If we think back to that author and you, it's that third type of text-based question, and it's text implicit because the answer is not explicitly stated. There is some inferring involved. Statement number 3. Understanding text structure or text features is irrelevant. We've all got that there. Absolutely false. We know that knowledge of features and in text and text structure can certainly help us have a bit of an advanced organizer of the text and find information more quickly when we need to. And number 4, knowing why, when, and where to look back is a habit of mind to be developed. 100% true. Absolutely right. Students need to, get in the habit of realizing that it is important to look back when it's important to do so, and also knowing where to look. And the last go ahead, sorry.
We spoke about how much we've enjoyed sort of using and learning that habit of mind, because really, a lot of what we've done has been in terms of developing that habit of mind. And so I often think that way now. But we enjoyed, I think, that sort of phrase.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the last statement, the ability to find text evidence does not depend on foundational skills, but as we can see, it absolutely does depend on foundational skills such as note-taking and annotating and using text features, all of those skills that need to be taught and practiced and are key to finding evidence in text. Okay, I'm going
We're
to
going to
end
end it and see what happens. Oh, share results.
Oh, there we go. Thank you,
Next time we
everybody, for
know.
bearing with us. Yeah, we know what happens. Okay.
Oh, I share it. I'm sharing them. So maybe, okay. So are we stopping that?
Yeah, we're stopping that.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay. And so with that, we're going to get right into session 6. The chapter title is Stretching Students in Text. And our agenda for tonight is quite simple. We have 3 main parts. We're going to look into a bit of the theory and the background information, go through some activities. We will have a literacy lounge in there, and then we will wrap up. Of course, the text, as always, is Teaching Skills for Complex Text by Dr. Heidi Ann Mesmer. And this is our last session. So feels like we've been at this for a bit and learned a lot, hopefully. I mean, we've
learned a boatload. Yeah. And we're grateful that you've stuck with us. So
exactly.
Thank you.
That's back over to you, Leigh.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Nellie. So we're going to now talk about some of the theory, the background, which is sort of the what and the why. And this doesn't mean, of course, that reading all texts aloud or having students buddy up to read them or providing students with text beyond their reach. What we're really looking at is how to authentically stretch students in a way that benefits them but doesn't break or defeat them. And that really is that balancing act. We want to be able to support students in material that is more difficult than they might be able to read and comprehend on their own, but they would be able to do with some support. And so our first takeaway is a reality in many classrooms. How do we stretch students and provide access to complex text when many of them are not able to read at grade level? And so this really brings us to that full circle, how to bridge the gap between low decoding, but still provide access to complex text that students need to develop comprehension, their vocabulary, understanding of morphology, and to build background knowledge. And we thought that we would take us back to an article that we looked at earlier in the book study, Time and Text. And so I did that at this time as well. Nellie and I chatted about it the other night. I highlighted, I've circled, and I think that I could read this a number of times. So the article is Time and Text, Differentiating Instruction for Intermediate Students Struggling with Word Recognition. And Una, I don't know if you're able to pop that link in the chat for us. But we would encourage you to save that and consider printing it off or reading it, highlighting it, and sharing with colleagues. In the article, Dr. Mesmer reminds us that while reading aloud is absolutely an important part of practice, it should not supplant, of course, having students read material on their own. She says that we don't want to end up with students who think like champs, but that aren't able to read or recognize words. And that is absolutely what we've been talking about, how to provide students with that access to vital time and text. That was supposed to have an animation. So let me just see if I can move that thing off of there. There we go. This is a very low tech way to show this, but that's the way it is. Our animation disappeared. Oh, no, it didn't. That was right. I apologize. We had gotten into that. So yes, that's the article that we wanted to highlight and have you take a peek at. Okay. So we just wanted to very briefly touch on the instructional hierarchy because we really have spent some time with it during this. Remember that it is that well-established model of skill acquisition. And today we're going to be discussing that final stage, the generalization and adaptation stage, where students apply and practice skills and use their knowledge in a new context and setting. In adaptation, students can perform skills across a variety of settings with accuracy and proficiency. And once we have the acquisition, once we've built that fluency through practice, supported practice, students can generalize and adapt it. And of course, as educators, we still want to talk about and think about, those foundational pieces that involve decoding and fluency, particularly for our students who struggle to access grade level text. And so, as students are able to generalize and adapt, we want to continue to work with students for whom accessing grade level text might continue to be difficult. So stretching or challenging students in text means supporting them in material that is harder than they might be able to handle on their own. And Dr. Mesmer says that on page 136. When teachers stretch students, they offer considerable support through discussion, rereading, and scaffolding. Usually stretching a student is not reading the text aloud to them, or having a friend read the book or text aloud to them, or having students listen to an audio version of the text. And why is this important? Well, a study done by the American College Testing found that high school students who were exposed to more complex text had an increased likelihood of earning grades such as a B or higher in college, which is our university, social studies courses. It is through access to complex text that students build and deepen their knowledge of words in the world. And Dr. Mesmer goes on to include what was said by Moore, Cunningham, and Cunningham, and that is the goal is optimal challenge. Challenge calls for increased effort from students, but it doesn't defeat them. Rather, it builds and strengthens their will to succeed. And this is that's fine edge of student abilities, where they are initially perhaps unable to accomplish a task, but can do so with the help of others. And so this brings up the question of what is grade level text? How do we decide or choose? And there are just so many factors. We need to consider what would be considered independent, instructional, and frustrational in terms of reading accuracy and comprehension, as well as text length, reader background, their knowledge and interest. Stretching at the instructional level is not the same necessarily for every student, and it will in fact vary from text to text. And of course, common sense, professional judgment, and good practice should prevail, bearing in mind, of course, that educators will have differing levels of professional judgment and awareness of good practice, depending on their own understanding and learning.
And so on pages 136 and 137, Dr. Mesmer does go through some key principles for stretching students and this idea of stretching them without breaking them, as she puts it. The first one is around differentiation and differentiating texts. And she says, all students don't have to read the same text. As long as we're being intentional with respect to our learning goal and our purpose, what is the outcome we want? What do we want students to learn and be able to do as the result of a particular text? It is okay that not every student is reading the same text. The second principle, sorry, just clicking through here, is that the optimal level to stretch students toward is, approximately one level higher than what their independent reading level would be. So she actually shares that there really is no research to back up going more than one level above, and shares a study of third graders where more than one level above, stretching them beyond that, actually led to a mean comprehension of only 53%. Vocabulary and background knowledge matter. And we know this already, right? So how new is the information in the text? Do the students know the related vocabulary, or do they have the background knowledge on the topic? All of these things play a role in the text choice that we choose, the complexity of the text that we're choosing. We want to keep it simpler if a lot of the vocabulary and content being presented in the text is new. We might consider a shorter text, a less dense text. And that leads us to the next key principle, which is around the length. And this goes back to that last point. So if the material is new and includes content that the students are relatively unfamiliar with, a longer text does require more stamina and can often make a text harder. And finally, well, not finally, almost finally, motivation and interest. Higher levels of motivation often mean a student will persevere more through a text. And if they have more background knowledge about a topic, they're typically more interested. And in this case, they can be stretched a bit further in terms of complexity and in the text that they're reading. The last key principle that she shares with us actually is to work through these stretched texts silently. So, for decoding, of course, early readers, decoding practice, we want students reading orally. And she does say that maybe they're reading it through the first time orally, but subsequent reads should be silent to allow for full engagement with the text, full processing of the text. And she adds, and I'm taking this directly from the chapter, that the focus on saying words aloud can detract from the critical cognitive work that must take place as comprehension occurs. And that, I know we've touched upon this before, reading aloud as the only access to text serves to kind of reinforce the notion that reading is primarily about word recognition, which of course we know is one essential piece of the puzzle, but it's not enough. So we want to teach students to read harder texts, to closely read texts rigorously and intentionally, and especially to read nonfiction more effectively. And then, just because we can't ignore the other side of this coin, we also want to teach students, the other part of this that could be an entirely different book study, is teaching students to write more effectively in direct response to texts. And in every session, we've tried to connect back to our language document, our provincial language curriculum, and specifically Strand C. And as we wrap up our work tonight towards, the end of this evening, and dig into ways that we can have students work with, ways that we can stretch students in complex text, we come right back to C1. And of course, this is an oversimplification, but we can see that in grade 1, knowledge about texts, students have to read and comprehend short, simple texts, and then stretching right through to grade 9 when they're learning to do the same with increasingly complex texts. And the last thing I'll mention here is that we also want to keep in mind that in C3, as you can see there, and we've looked at before, the expectation does highlight having students work with both literary and informational texts. And so Dr. Mesmer explains that, the activities in this chapter are meant to help build students' capacity for more challenging reading in terms of level, in terms of focus, and higher level cognitive skills. And what we want for students in working through these activities is for them to learn and be able to read and comprehend complex literary and informational texts, both independently and proficiently. So basically, those are the expectations that we see reflected in that C strand of our own provincial curriculum.
So in the text, Dr. Mesmer, I'm unmuted, good, includes 4 types of activities, which include text sets, by ability, complementary text sets, and disruptive text sets, rereading, developing stamina, and then very closely linked to that is teaching executive function skills, because we do know that stamina and executive function skills are intertwined, because stamina does require a specific set of executive function skills. And so on page 138, Dr. Mesmer provides information on what text sets might be, what they might offer, and how we might create them and their purpose. So a text set is a group of text or materials assembled together for a particular instructional purpose. A text set might include materials of the same type, but at differing levels, or it might include different materials such as poems, articles, stories, picture books, videos, photos, etc. So the text includes 3 different approaches to creating those in order to challenge our students. The first is by ability, which allows us to provide access to information on a theme or topic while differentiating for different reading abilities. Of course, we still need to provide instruction and intervention for students unable to access grade level texts, so that we can work towards obviously trying to have that goal of having them access, having the abilities to access texts. This involves meaningful reading. By ability does not mean one size fits all. And we wanted to ensure, or she really does point out, that when we read aloud constantly to our weakest students, that means they get the least amount of reading practice when really they need a lot of it. So, a lot of things for us to consider. in terms of the abilities of our students and how to best support them. She also mentions complementary texts, which are texts on the same theme, and they serve to extend knowledge around a text or a story. So again, it might include all of those different multimedia texts from above that I mentioned. She suggests picking that focal text first and then building those complementary materials around it. And then finally, disruptive text sets. So those are texts that provide a different point of view. They don't necessarily stretch the reading level per se, but they provide that opportunity to have higher level thinking. They provide different perspectives on a given topic. And we are going to look more closely at text sets in our literacy lounge shortly. So the next thing that Dr. Mesmer points out is when it comes to rereading, that, we are doing already a lot more close reading, and teachers are going more and more into a deeper reading of text with analysis, which is a great thing. She includes that rereading has often been done in support of building fluency, and I have to say that that has been in the past a focus of mine, building fluency in word recognition, when in fact we can really use it to deepen comprehension. The most sophisticated, interesting, and complex texts that students read do require multiple readings and deep reflection. If you think of yourself reading complex material, there's a very slim chance that you read it once and just move on. So, of course, our students need to know that same principle. They found that students believe that good readers read a text only once, when in fact this only provides that surface level basic understanding of a text. And also we know that students have to be taught how to reread, and this is very different than simply telling students to reread. And in the text on page 140, somewhere in the, page 141, she provides a sample routine of how multiple readings of a text might be done so that students really understand it. And she uses a text that is available from ReadWorks, so that is something that you could try out. There is a script that you could also use. And that's something that you could try out to model with your students. We want to ensure that we include setting a purpose for rereading, exploring the tone of the text, identifying imagery, and/or considering those different perspectives in text. And additionally, we want to explore which sections of the text or parts should be reread, because not all parts necessarily warrant it. And we want to sort of show them and model them which part you will want to reread and why. And as educators, we have to build capacity for challenging and complex texts by supporting our students in developing their reading stamina. I'm sure we've all seen students who aren't able to maintain their stamina and their focus in text. And it does require practice, just like stamina at anything does require an intentional building of it. Reading is no different. So stamina is the ability to sustain prolonged effort on a challenging task, and this can be mental or physical. And this requires specific executive function skills in addition to those word recognition and reading skills and comprehension. Executive function skills are those organizational skills that help us to get things done. And on page 143, this excellent quote can be found: reading harder, longer, and denser passages requires tenacity, grit, and discipline. And of course, we can't just expect our students to have that. We have to support them in building it. And so we could spend ages on executive function skills, what they are, why they're important, how to teach. But tonight we're just going to provide an overview from the text, or as Nellie would say, a survol. So firstly, it is important to remember that we do have to support students in developing their executive function skills. We can see how the skills listed on page 143, inhibition, shift, emotional control, initiation, working memory, planning and organization of materials, self-monitoring, all of those overlap with the learning skills and work habits on our provincial report cards, which are, again, initiation, planning, organization, self-monitoring, that self-regulation piece. So all of those can be connected and tied back to the work habits and learning skills that can be found on our report card. And this is really about teaching students how to learn, or learning how to learn. And in the text, Dr. Mesmer includes a 5-step process or approach to building stamina based on the work of 2 teachers. And it's around working with students to set goals. And those steps very briefly include getting that baseline of where their stamina is, building an understanding of what sustained reading looks, sounds, and feels like, setting reasonable goals, achievable goals, and then working towards building those, overcoming roadblocks with stamina. And she does provide some boosting strategies with which to do that, which we'll talk about in a quick second. And then finally, evaluating goals. So there's a chart on page 150 with examples of phrases that have self-talk, and those are framed as I can statements or I will. And those are specific to a particular executive function as it pertains specifically to improving that stamina. But you can see, of course, that this can be adapted for other activities and posted as an anchor chart for your classroom. So as an example, I'm looking directly in the text here on page 150. It's actually the last piece of the text, which is a great way to finish this book off, are those statements. So an example of self-regulation and support of boosting stamina, the two I statements are, if I am not motivated, I set a reward. I problem solve before asking for help. And we know that for some students, we'll have to break those down even further. So what does problem solving before asking for help look or sound like? We can also include student voice in the creation of these to set up motivation and buy-in and engagement. And of course, they don't have to be used all at once. We want to start small and use our knowledge of our students and our context. And we wanted to include this because sometimes some of those skills we take for granted that students understand them, they'll learn them, they'll pick them up. And we require, of course, like everything that we do at school, explicit teaching, modeling, and opportunities to practice with feedback in order to get that growth and learning along the way. Yeah, and I think that quote from Dr. Mesmer that when we provide vague messages to students, so do it as opposed to how to do it, really is the difference in getting that learning embedded in students so that they can use it and apply it on their own.
Thank you, Leigh. You can hear me all right, eh?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so this is wonderful. We've come to our one and only literacy lounge for our last session. And I'm going to go through it and explain it. And then as with all of our literacy lounges, feel free to participate as you wish. I mean, we'd love for you to participate. We're hoping that we're going to be able to give a nice chunk of time, and we're hoping that this will be a meaningful exercise for you. So we're actually going to work on building a text set, which was a strategy that Leigh went through a few slides ago. So I'm going to actually, Leigh, if you could just click through there, I'm going to kind of explain what the task looks like, and then Leigh is going to walk us through a bit of an example. So our focus is going to be building a text set in the content area of science. And, don't forget, we can think multimedia text sources here. We're giving some suggestions of possible text sources, such as ReadWorks, ONlit, which we introduced in our last session, textproject.org, Newsela or Newsela, National Geographic Kids, and you may and likely know of others. Some of these, for example, textproject.org, you don't require an account. ReadWorks, you do require an account to be able to log in, but all of these are free. And what is going to happen is we have a central document for you that you will go into, and from there you can choose which grade you would like to work on, and that will take you over to a grade level document that we've started to populate for you. So I think, Leigh, this would be actually a great moment for you to take us into that main document and just show us what. Perfect.
Sure. Okay, so because I teach grade 4, that's obviously the one that I dug into a little bit more deeply. So this is the document that everyone will get access to. You don't have editing for this because you won't need it. But once you select your grade, you will have access for editing. And so we, as Nellie said, populated a few things. You can see that we highlighted the strand, the type of text. And so, for example, is it disruptive, complementary? Is it information? Is it a video? And then we included a link to it. And we realized we're going to give you about, I think, 15, 20-ish minutes, which is our goal. And we know that, it might not get finished tonight, but we wanted you to have access to this. So once you open it, you'll have access to it and build perhaps together some text that you can access later on.
I was just going to add, Leigh, that, sorry to jump in,
Yeah.
in the main document, there is, as a resource or tool for you, there is a link to quite a helpful article. I believe it's from Achieve the Core, right?
It is, yes.
On putting together text sets. That's just there as a resource for you at the top of that main page.
Yep. And then I've linked the science curriculum as well if you want to dig in, but chances are your own curriculum expectations quite well. And again, we want to, just acknowledge that if you get one source in tonight, that would be excellent. And if you add to it later on, great. If you keep it and access it later, wonderful. And of course, you can just add to the table. So I think that's our goal, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind putting the link in the chat, and everyone just remember to open up that document before you leave.
And so we know that that was just enough time to barely get started. And so I was about to add something on space. I was just trying to remember if that was grade 5 or 6. And again, we would love for you to consider keeping these active and using them and adding to them if you come across something great, because we are definitely stronger together. Oh, I have to get my speaker notes back. Oh, phew. Okay.
Thanks, Leigh. And I was just going to
Retrieval practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Better you than me, Leigh. I was just going to add to that and yet say yes, it was like just enough time to, scratch the surface of the potential of what that could be. So thank you so much for even, engaging in that for a few short minutes. And as Leigh said, now you have those documents available to you. Should you wish to continue building upon that work, please do share and collaborate with colleagues what's already there. So before we move on, we did want to take a moment to highlight this fantastic tool, stretch text selection checklist. It's a bit of a mouthful. That's presented, it's explained on page 142, but the chart itself is figure 6.5. Figure 6.5, the chart itself is on page 142. So, we all know that it can be really challenging and daunting and tricky to know what text to use and when and for what purpose. And so this checklist really guides our thinking as educators in terms of, firstly, what is our purpose? Is it to provide a challenge at a slightly higher level for students? Is it to improve stamina? Is it to push critical thinking skills or to introduce new content? And then secondly, what are the factors that might impact the work in that specific stretch text? So looking at things such as the length of the text itself, the level of interest of the readers and what they're bringing to the text, their vocabulary knowledge, their background knowledge, the difficulty level of the text, and finally, also thinking about how will students access the text. So is it digital? Is it print? Will it be read aloud the first time? Will it not be read aloud at all? Etc. So please do check that out. It is presented in more detail in this last chapter of the book, and we really thought it was quite a handy little tool. So here is our second and final takeaway for our book study, second for the evening, final for all of the sessions. And we really think that this is broad enough to capture much of what we've talked about throughout our sessions. The main thing, and this is true in most pedagogical contexts, right, is to decide on your purpose. So here we would decide on our purpose for stretching students in a particular text in the first place, and then choose the activity that best fits that goal, whether it's stamina building, using a text set, or something else. So coming back to this idea of intentionality, being intentional, having a solid plan, and knowing your big picture and knowing your students. And then, as Dr. Mesmer states, with sound practices, the goals will be reached and students optimally challenged. And I do feel like this is a great piece of, reassuring advice that we can all tuck away and take with us in the back of our minds. And we are going to move towards wrapping up. So returning once again to this idea of the importance of students accumulating miles on the page, but also adding to that, that those miles should be miles that actually count, right? And knowing the value of practice, practice, practice with feedback and opportunities for meaningful talk. So this quote comes from page 139. There is no activity that builds students' capacity for challenging text more than actual reading. So first, we want to ensure that we're teaching all of our students to read, not just to read, but to read well and to read on their own in the classroom, and then well beyond the classroom, and for the duration of the rest of their lives. Okay, some really exciting news to share. The Fluency in Perspective Grade 8 resource that we shared at an earlier session, a grade 7 version is now ready to be released. And I do believe there will be a bit of a release party, a launch seminar next week. So that is an exciting event coming up. And the resource will be as amazing as the grade 8 version is, worked on by a fantastic team of ONlit members. So we just wanted to make you aware of that. And then please do keep in touch. We know that many questions come up after the fact. Maybe if you're anything like Leigh and I, will go to bed tonight and spin and think about and keep processing and reflecting. So if something comes up as you continue to learn about complex text, or as you're trying to implement things and put theory into practice, please do reach out. We learn so much from helping one another. And those are our emails. There is also the Ask an Expert feature through the ONlit website. So yeah, take advantage of that.
A very, very, very big thanks for being our intrepid leaders, digging into a challenging, I hesitate to say a complex topic. That would be a little bit cringy, but a difficult topic that, really, I think about just the importance of really digging into that topic and making space for muddling through a lot of these big considerations around helping students navigate difficult, challenging texts and what that looks like in terms of their comprehension. So I am just so thankful for you two jumping in with such enthusiasm and such reflection and thought and really careful consideration of how to explore this content, both yourselves and then for everybody who joined. So a very big thank you to both of you for doing that with such skill. So thankful you've joined us. We will edit this recording and pop it up on the website as well. And just so thankful that you all joined us. Happy to pass it back over to you two if there's any last things you need to share, or we can wrap up.
I think just wishing everyone the best with I feel like time is flying by, the remaining weeks within the school year, and wishing you a wonderful summer once it finally hits. And continued learning. Maybe we'll get to see some of you at the IDA conference in Toronto or the OMLTA conference this coming weekend. Please say hello.
Please do. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.